on, guys? Hello? Yes. Good evening, and welcome to Seven Stories Up. Edward McPherson with Robert Sullivan. Look out, the delight and danger of taking the long view. We are delighted to have you all joining us tonight at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Jackie Trailis, and I'm a member of the programs team here at SNFL. This book was selected tonight by one of our librarians, Rachel Crook, who could not be here because she's under the weather. Feel better, Rachel. Before we begin, we would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's possible. I would like to encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at upcoming programs like this one. We have an excellent lineup this season featuring nonfiction, music, and more. We would love for you to join us in this space again. It is now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Edward McPherson is the author of Look Out, The Delight and Danger of Taking the Long View. Buster Keaton, Tempest in a Flat Hat. The Backwash Squeeze and Other Improbable Feats, and The History of the Future, American Essays. He has received a Guggenheim Fellowship and a Pushcart Prize, among other awards. He teaches creative writing at Washington University in St. Louis. Robert Sullivan is the author of 8 books, including The Meadowlands, Rats, and My American Revolution. His most recent book is Double Exposure, Resurveying the West with Timothy O'Sullivan, America's Most Mysterious War Photographer, published by FSG. He is a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow, a 2025 recipient of an Arts and Letters Award in Literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, and a contributing editor and board member at A Public Space. He lives in Philadelphia. It is now my pleasure to welcome tonight's guest to the stage. Back.
I'm such a nerd, I brought notes. First, I'd like to thank the New York Public Library for hosting me. I don't think I need to tell any of y'all just how amazing this institution is, and I hadn't been in this new redo, which is sort of mind-blowing. But this place has long been a fascination of mine. I couldn't have written my first book, which was a biography of Buster Keaton, like 20 years ago without a lot of help from the New York Public Library. I published a short story about the inner lives of the New York, the old telephone reference desk, which I got obsessed with for a while. And all of my books, I mean, it's only 4, not as many as Robert Sullivan's, but all of them benefited from the library in the research in one way or another. So I'm just grateful to be here. And lately, I think we all know librarians are the heroes of the age. So thanks to the library. Thanks for coming. This is starting to sound like an Oscar speech, but for both me and my wife, I think New York was probably our first love, and we try to come back as often as we can. So I really appreciate it. I'm already sort of being blown away by familiar faces in the audience. There are a lot of people I admire in this room, writers who helped me see words differently when I was just a little baby college graduate in New York City. I also see some old colleagues from the magazine days. I think maybe a former student or two, editors and book people that I owe a great deal to, some of our dearest friends. So, and of course, Emma, who I won't single out, but is my brilliant and tireless agent of of 2 decades, who always reminds me that the work comes first. And when I tell her what I've been up to lately, she never once has said, so what, you don't like making more money for your family? So I appreciate Emma so much. This is all a long way of saying thanks for being here. It really means a lot, not just selfishly for me and my book, but lately I've found it's been really refreshing and rejuvenating to be together in these pretty wild times. So thanks for coming. And then there's Robert Sullivan, who I'm meeting for the first time tonight, although I've known his books forever, it feels like, including his last one, Double Exposure. I'm a little nervous to chat with him because he knows where all the bodies are buried when it comes to history. Like, he's literally dug them up, either if it's like metaphorically, but also literally. You know, it could be like a Revolutionary War radical that no one remembers, or actually the actual remains of the original Penn Station, which he went and found in the Meadowlands. you know, and then I mean, so you can ask him questions too, I think is what I'm saying. The first book of his I encountered was about rats, which I looked back and I assigned it at the very first time I was allowed to teach a college creative writing class. I assigned this book because it's so good. Oh, June's like, oh yeah, we had to read it. Sorry.
I'm
You know,
sorry.
it's a book about rats. It's also a book about New York. It's a book about deep history. And the way, in my mind, that book works is it's just a proof that all you have to do in this country is go out into your backyard and start digging in the dirt, and the past is going to bubble forth for better or for worse, which is a model for writing books that I've clearly stolen ever since. So thanks to Robert. All right, Oscar speech over. Um, I will. I'm going to read for no more than 10 minutes. Which, if it gets too long, just start shifting, and then I know we're done. Choosing an excerpt from this book is hard. It's a cultural history about the long view or aerial view, big picture thinking, both very literally but also a bit more metaphorically. It surveys a slew of topics, personal, reported. It goes from Earth to outer space, from the distant past to the distant future. Things like old maps, early flight, drones, surveillance, land art, climate change, the pandemic, the stories we tell about history. Um, you know, a future society that buried a clock that's going to supposedly run for 10,000 years and more. It's grounded in St. Louis, where we live now, a place that has a long history with the aerial imagination, but also more emphatically right now, a government spy agency has leveled a neighborhood to build their new headquarters. But I also go to the West Texas desert, where billionaires are blasting themselves into space, and Alaska to fly over a melting glacier, among other things. What else about the book? I'm trying to set it up. It's a book that remains deeply suspicious of its own project. It never wants to forget what it's like to be left back on the ground, which is, you know, where I and most of my friends live. But it does mean picking a snippet to read for you all tonight is kind of hard because there's a slew of topics. But in the end, I decided to read a little bit from the beginning, so all that context with Worthless, but also to leap over and then read some stuff from the end. So you can just imagine what a glorious middle it must have. And if you don't like what you hear, I'll do this for Emma. You just buy the book anyway, because you can just imagine all the wonderful sections I didn't read. But it starts, "This blue marble lost in space." On December 7th, 1972, some 5 hours and 18,000 miles away from the Earth, traveling at more than 16,000 feet per second on the outbound leg of the Apollo 17 mission to the Moon, astronaut Harrison H. Schmitt pointed a 70mm Hasselblad data camera back at the Earth and, though the crew was not scheduled to take pictures, snapped a photo. The image, labeled by NASA as AS17-148-22727, but better known as the Blue Marble, would become the most reproduced photograph in history. After the film returned to Earth, the image would grace the front page of nearly every world newspaper. The shot is stunning. A planet bathed in sunlight, no trace of humanity, only swirling white clouds, the greens and browns of Africa, the sands of the Arabian Peninsula, the bright Antarctic ice, a cyclone spinning off India, the deep ocean blue, a world at once vast and vulnerable, so very exposed, only a thin slip of atmosphere separating it from the cold dark of space. I'm going to skip ahead. The Blue Marble photo has been credited for everything from spurring the environmental movement, behold our fragile planet, to fueling the counterculture, to furthering globalization, no borders, no boundaries, to raising human consciousness and encouraging a new way of seeing. In the New York Times, the Blue Marble ran above the fold on Christmas Eve, sandwiched between stories about youth and heroin, radicals bombing Fifth Avenue department stores, and the headline, "Heavy raids go on for 7th day in North Vietnam." A flash of hope at the end of a very bleak year. But consider the astronauts of Apollo 14, a year before the Blue Marble was taken, trudging uphill through moon dust that clings to the legs of their bulky suits, dragging behind them a rickshaw full of equipment that leaves glinting tracks in the sun. The expedition, the second of two scheduled for the mission, had been assiduously planned. two men were taking the first long walk on the moon, hoping to travel more than 3 times farther from their ship than previous crews. They carried finely gridded maps to help them traverse the surface. For years, government cartographers, including many in St. Louis, had used aerial and astronomical imagery to create stunningly detailed lunar charts, atlases, globes, slides, models, and even a flying simulator that early astronauts trained on. The landing of Apollo 14 had been the most precise to date, less than 100 feet from the target on the map. But things were different on the ground. In the crystalline light and dark of the lunarscape, no atmospheric haze, just a bright, monotonous undulation of pockmarked gray rubble. Distances collapsed. Objects seemed to disappear. Their objective? Walk about 3/4 of a mile to the rim of the vast cone crater and collect a rock sample. But looking around, the spacemen couldn't find the landmarks on their maps. And these are quotes from the mission tapes. We should have done this as like a two-man show. Anyway, imagine. Well, where do you think we are? Where are you? Right behind you. That crater is that crater right up there. That crater is the crater over to the left of it. Where do you think B is? I think B is the one we just passed, back there where we were talking. All right. Doggone it, you sure can be deceived by slopes here. The sun angle is very deceiving. Yep, it's going to take longer than we expected. Our positions are all in doubt now. We've got a ways to go yet. I don't think we have time to get there. Oh, let's give it a whirl. Gee whiz, we can't stop without looking into Cone Crater. We've lost everything if we don't get there. The confused astronauts argue over their position, with mission control no help at all. Photos show a spaceman staring at his map. I have a picture in there, it's great. In danger of exhausting their air, water, and strength, the men will never make it to the crater. At one point during the grueling hike, Houston tells them to just count the spot they're standing on as the rim. The astronauts press on, calling the controllers Sphinx, but eventually they'll have to give up, take what samples they can, and double back. All this way, and they'll never get the view. They will at least bring back a 4-billion-year-old rock that contains a tiny fragment of Earth from around the time when the moon was ejected via collision with another celestial object or objects from our still molten planet. Our earliest piece of history, a bit of what became the Earth flung out onto what was becoming the moon. Those traces, however, won't be discovered for nearly 50 years. So maybe it is to cheer himself up that 4 hours, 34 minutes, and 41 seconds after exiting the hatch, wrapping up a frustrating trek of nearly 2 miles, one of the astronauts takes out a 6-iron and slices 2 golf balls into the lunar dark, and then shuts himself and his partner into the module for good, lifts up to dock with the command capsule called Kitty Hawk, and heads the roughly 240,000 miles home. Perhaps it wasn't surprising the men lost their way. Humans had only been flying for 67 years, since the Wright brothers took off. An aerial photograph of the Apollo 14 landing site, with the round trip to the giant crater marked with a thin, squiggly line, is almost comical. The moon men had no idea they'd gotten so close, perhaps just 50 feet from the rim. All right, that's from the beginning. And now I'm going to scooch ahead to the end. But lest you think it's all historical, like I said, I interview a spy. I sit behind Adam Schiff at the groundbreaking while he's running the impeachment hearings against Trump. I'm back in that same neighborhood like 5 years later talking to a resident whose house was demolished to make room. I go to Texas. I go to Alaska. But, things in the book get a little dark. There are lots of problems that don't resolve easily. A lot of this is what I'm leaping over. But I thought maybe I would end this little section with just maybe a glimmer, a snippet of hope. So this is from a section called Standing in the Shadow. Because the book is also about awe and what the long view can do for awe and wonder. Rural Missouri. A park south of town on the edge of the Ozarks. Out-of-state license plates in the lot. There's talk of visitors from Germany, Argentina, Peru. A week ago, any hotel rooms left were going for more than $600. T-shirts for sale. The barbecue truck runs out of meat. Fields, fishermen, bikes on a trail. The kids are off school. The sun hangs in blue sky streaked with a few cloudy wisps, below which red tails circle warily. A breeze skims off the lake. The moon begins to gobble the sun. A black and white dog, unhappily tied to a picnic table, starts to speak in a throaty, proto-human yowl. A newscopter hovers in the distance. A prop plane swoops low, then a hobby drone buzzes the field, watching us, watching it. A man passes a smoldering bundle slowly back and forth over an older woman, eyes closed, smoke haloing her upturned face. The light flattens, leaches into steel. The grass deadens. Slivers of shadow sway in the dirt beneath piney trees. The wind drops. The air grows cold. My wife puts on a hoodie. My daughter dances, leaping through granular light. Our camp chairs glow blue, though only in perception, not in reality, whatever that means, as this sudden gloom has both the rods and cones of our eyes firing at the same time, brief doubled sight. The sun sets all around us, the horizon a ring of red, smokeless fire, except for dead ahead, where the shadow is coming for us, a dark storm with no clouds. Flies appear in the dusk. Crickets sing. Venus comes out, then Jupiter. Whistles from across the lake. A diamond in the sky. Totality. The children scream. My daughter gasps. My wife lets out a strangled bark. She's here. We have it on tape. I think I stay silent, but later I'll hear myself on video making an inarticulate noise. The corona blooms and it's huge. Fiery white tendrils shooting from a hole punched through the sky. The hairs on my arm porcupine. Here is my skin cooled by 100-mile-wide shadow, skirting the ground at more than twice the speed of sound, thrown off a dead rock some 220,000 miles above me by a ball of fire over 90 million miles away. Days before, a guy in our building told my wife he wasn't going anywhere near the big show. He'd skipped the short drive into the path of totality. A former Marine, he'd lived through Katrina. When a crowd heads one way, he heads the other. I get it. I really do. Seen from space, the moon's shadow looks gangrenous, like a rotting wound or void in the glowing whole Earth. In about 600 million years, there will be no more total eclipses, as the moon is drifting away from us at fingernail's pace. Eventually, it will be too small in the sky to fully block the sun. One day, more than 1 billion years from now, there will be no eclipses at all, though we won't be here either, no matter what we do, as by then our dying star, burning itself out in a runaway blaze, will have boiled the seas away. The moment is so small and so big. The other day, a woman on the radio compared the rapture of totality to the overview effect. A headline in the Washington Post wondered how the eclipse might heal our tattered nation. Twice as many Americans watched the last one than they did the Super Bowl. Maybe I'm falling prey to the same wistful thinking. This was before the next tragedy, the oblivious violence and most recent disaster, whatever contagion and chaos the future is hurling at us, same as it ever has. But for a little while, the country looks up, or at least the 329 million of us living in the contiguous 48 states, our day at least partially eclipsed, as the upper world brushes the lower. No need for a monument. Today in the shadow, the owls woke up. In zoos, the giraffes huddled close, while penguins and flamingos flocked together for safety. A crocodile bedded down, and the tortoises overran the door to their nighttime enclosure. Meanwhile, nearly 400 people got married at a mass ceremony in Arkansas. NASA chased the moment at 460 miles per hour in high-altitude jets, trying as ever to extend the view, but not even they could keep up. By the time my family gets in the car, the shadow is hitting Vermont. What is the length of a feeling? Totality lasted minutes, or an eternity, or was nothing at all. The closest I will come to space, this shadow touching down. Rattletrap clockwork, wheels within wheels. The wide universe stopped down like a lens to focus on these weedy ball fields at the end of town. My town, your town, our little lives briefly singled out. But of course, totality, like any vision, remains an illusion, a story to tell. We are the falsely elect. Alignment is accidental. The singularity isn't personal, except that we happen to still be around to see it. But standing in a field of families and strangers, stunned by the light and dark bearing down, all I can think is, this, now, this right here. Thanks. That's all I got.
Thank you. That was the line. There was a question that started with quoting that line. What is the length of a feeling? Which is such a good line. Thank you very much. Nice to be here. I'm screwing up the sound probably by shifting my chair, but we've you're asked to do Qs at a Q&A, and you worry about your Qs, but you when you meet with the author for the first time and you're very excited to do so, you hash some things out. So you might have heard some shouting back there, some screaming. A chair, I think, was thrown, but nothing was broken, and we agreed on a first question. So I'm going to do that first question, but I also worked very hard on what are so horrifyingly called blurbs, and I just wanted to read it real quick, because why not? This is a beautiful book about first how hard it is to see where we are in the world, and then why trying matters. In these deliciously wide-wandering essays, working through time and space, ancient pasts, and bizarre futures, like some super bizarre futures, no fear. McPherson shows us the sightlines the technologies have enticed us with, and in so doing, the human landscapes that they have obscured or worse. Lookout makes you feel small and concerned, but it also moves you forward with its thrilling panoramic care, and with the idea that taking notice of where you are right now is infinitely valuable, a goal that we keep forgetting is right there. Thank you. Something I really love about the book is how you start and end with the moon, and how we all kind of feel the moon when we go out and look at that full moon. I just got a new full moon calendar this year that has apogees on it, so very, very exciting. But so the first question, though, that we agreed on, and I hope I get this right, and please correct me if I have the first question.
I don't remember what it is.
How did you happen to write this book?
Oh, great softball. Thank you, Robert Sullivan. I think, there's like a spiritual answer and then sort of a boring answer. The boring answer is I needed to come up with another book. It was time. I wanted to get
That's
promoted.
Spiritual too. If you're a writer for a living,
money. No, but these were things I'd been thinking about. I'm definitely sort of a sucker for a window seat in the airplane. I love an obsessive and intricate old map. So some of these things were just boring stuff that Edward likes. I was doing we live in St. Louis, as I think you've ascertained, and we live near this giant park where some of the early experiments in flight were taking place, so I started to look at that.
What park is that?
Forest Park.
Yeah, okay, that's where they have?
You know Forest Park.
I know, but I didn't know the early experiments in flight. Okay, yeah.
Northwest corner was the first, right across, now it's a golf course.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's where the first flight west of Dayton was. So that was us in St. Louis. But so these were things I was kicking around, and this was 2017, 2018, 2019, doing some research, going through old stuff. But it really wasn't until the pandemic that the book really changed during the pandemic. And the derangement of time and space during that difficult and really weird time brought some themes to the book to the fore. One of the themes is more metaphoric uses of the long view, is how little h history becomes big H history, this collective story we semi-agree on with each other. And so a lot of that during the pandemic really sort of grew in my mind, at least.
The kind of what grew in what was
like
the book
we were living
before?
through capital H history, but everyone had these little histories, and none of them were in agreement.
Right.
So who gets to tell that story? So that pops up. There's, I talk about the Battle of Gettysburg, and there's a bunch of who gets to tell what story. But I was like, oh my God, we're living through this moment of history. Will we just not want to talk about it, or how will we find some sort of distance on it? And do we want to have distance on it? And things like that.
And the Gettysburg, if I'm pronouncing Gettysburg correctly.
Sure.
Thank you. The Gettysburg.
It's kind of like Gettysburg if you're from there. My dad's from there, so I'm quasi claiming some sort of cred.
That's why I'm trying to listen to the pronunciation. But with Gettysburg, that could you tell us about that map? That's how do we say his name?
Batchelder.
Batchelder's map is the kind of first map that comes out of Gettysburg.
Perfect.
And it becomes the map that everybody kind of fills into.
Right. And And John B. Batchelor. He's a painter. He's like a general.
This is
but it's
early in
sort
the
of-
book you talk about
Yes,
this.
and it's sort of an honorific military title. He's not really a military guy, but he was trying to make a big painting of the Revolutionary War and getting frustrated because there weren't any veterans around to talk to. So then the Civil War starts, and he knows that there's going to be a big battle, and he's kind of just lurking because he wants to paint history. So the Battle of Gettysburg happens.
Like a lot of painters and artists are lurking.
They were just vultures.
Or they're reporting for newspapers or
Yeah, no,
drawing for
absolutely.
newspapers.
I'm being flip.
Yes, no, it's fine.
And within 2 days of the battle, he's there, surveying the field, stepping over corpses and unexploded ordnance and dead horses and all of that. And he's just mapping it. And he's talking to Northerners. He's also talking to Southern prisoners. And he's just becomes obsessed. And so even before the war ends, he publishes this really striking panoramic map of where all the troops were for the 3 days, as best he can tell. And I'm going to sort of speed up because this is in the book. But the long story short is he tells a version of Gettysburg that's the one we know today. It's like the Kinburns version. And a lot of it hinges on this copse. This is a phrase he sort of not invents as an archaic word, but he brings it back. The copse of trees where Pickett's charge happens, which again, let's fast forward through history, but it's the turning point of Gettysburg, which then he says is the turning point of the war to save the soul of the country. And that's not exactly agreed on by people, but he sells it for years. And he sort of hollows out these trees that was as far as the South advanced.
Right.
This is going to lead to all sorts of things like the Lost Cause, this racist retelling in the South's imagination.
It's like the trees that they root their. This is the high watermark of the Confederacy, but it never went away.
Right, and he came up with that phrase, and it turns out, again, cover your ears if you don't want the spoiler, there were no trees.
There's no spoilers.
He made that up. Like there's a photograph where you can see it, and they're not any bigger than any other tree. It's sort of like a bush. But in his imagination, they loom so large, and he tells this story. So people start to visit this part on the battlefield that wasn't sort of pivotal in the first couple of years. And the map, and he just keeps remapping Gettysburg, and he becomes part of like the Battlefield Memorial Association, and he creates this version of the story that we know and love, et cetera, and also leads to all sorts of problems. But you get to watch him make it through his map, and my family has a copy of the map because we have family going back in Gettysburg, and my great-great-grandfather was like in correspondence with him. So it's a striking map, but you just see how this map is telling a story.
Yeah, and it's striking that so much of how we're like living out our political language today comes from that copse. It's I keep saying rooted in the copse of trees, which is really weird to say, but yes. But and then early on in the book too, and when I read this, I was so excited because this is something I'm just in love with. You can go to the Library of Congress, and they have all these panoramic maps of cities, of towns. So you can go to see the help me out with the date, but like 1870 view of Waldoboro, Maine. And, and basically a guy comes to your town back in the day and offers to make you a kind of drone drawing of your town. And you've seen them like in old town halls when you come in.
So it's like a bird's eye view map.
Yes.
And you come to town, he says, I'll go up in a hot air balloon and draw your town. And of course, he doesn't have a hot air balloon, but what he knows is like good Renaissance perspective drawing. Yes. And he just wanders your town and then draws a pretty accurate map of your town, and then sells it to you by subscription.
Yes.
And if you were to buy like 3 of my maps, maybe I'll make your house really nice, or I'll put your business in the key below. And if you pay me a little more, maybe we'll put you in a vignette on the side of the map. But so these are itinerant artists crisscrossing the country, and some of them would paint 200, 300, 400 maps in their lifetime. And these are little towns. It's not just Philadelphia. Yes. It's like tiny, and they'll come back in a couple of years and the town's doubled in size, and they'll redo the map.
But big towns too. And I have to read this in the book. You quote one of the town, the town bigwigs get behind these maps. And so here's the one from the Dallas Herald, December 28th, 1872. We call upon all our citizens, and especially upon the businessmen, to subscribe. The View will be one of the best advertisements that our city could send abroad to induce persons to locate among us. I think this is a really amazing thing because, did you already mention it tonight? I can't remember is it the
NGA?
The NGA, the National Geospatial
Intelligence
Agency, which is which hopefully you'll explain now, but like the relationship between this, like the Gettysburg map, where we're trying to figure out what just happened in in what's alleged to be, a big moment in how we form or unform our country or whatever our nation state. But then also it's related. It's the same time, around the same time, that people are like, if we don't have a map of our town, we can't sell it.
Right. I mean, maps are, they tell stories. They have narratives embedded in them, even when they, no, it's just a map. It's just like a cut and paste from life. It's not. I mean, we know that. We're not that naive. So back then, yes,
but we're not that naive, but everybody...
We keep falling for them.
It's a good thing about living in New York City, although even that's over because you see everybody coming out of the subway and immediately on their phone and turning left and not right. But a good thing about not living in New York City is you're not just getting in a car when you're 18 and driving to a place, and then your very old parent says to you, well, how did you get here? And they say to you,
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But
those maps back in the 19th century, they were part they were part like a selfie, like look how big we are. Literally putting your town on a map. So there's a lot of civic pride there. But it totally is it's an advertisement. It's inducement for new business. They were made by essentially European immigrants for other immigrants to try to lure them out. And of course, and they're huge, I should say, and they're beautiful. They're problematic, but they're beautiful. They're striking. They're oversized, and so the person would draw them and then send them off to a city where they get lithographed really exquisitely, and then they would deliver the copies to the town. And we have a whole bunch of them, like they exist in archives all over. But of course, they're calling in for this space to be filled in by railroads
the space is
people,
empty,
as if it's empty.
Yeah.
And so the map is hiding as much as it's holding, which of course is those who are on the land first. Right, this is not empty land, but it's arguing that it is. So one of the sutures to the NGA, and now we fast forwarded many.
And so define what that agency
is.
They're
a sort of lesser known government spy agency, although they keep telling me they don't like to be called a spy agency. So an intelligence agency. When the GPS goes out of my phone, you'll know why. They run GPS as well. But they do map analysis for a lot of people, like the intelligence services, the military.
Just a few.
Yeah, the politicians, decision makers, but also some first responders and stuff. They analyze, and they don't fly the drones, but they do all the map analysis for them. They also mapped the moon. The Apollo astronauts used, or a precursor agency used their maps to land on the moon, and they have an outpost in St. Louis for decades. So that's why they're in there.
But now they have built a bigger outpost.
So they've taken over this historically black neighborhood that was, parts of it were falling down. And I'm trying to summarize this quickly. It happens in the book very elegantly. You realize, it's coming
elegant.
together.
Now this isn't that.
This is the opposite of
that.
that.
No, everyone's fine.
But the phrase is the map is not the territory, but the map can make the territory is what the book keeps arguing, because what they use is these aerial views, and it's deeply ironic in a government that does aerial views to argue that this is an empty neighborhood, that no one lives here, which is not what the 200 people who were living in that neighborhood, 27 square blocks, had to say. But the city sells the land to the NGA, eminent domain, demolishes it, because from these aerial views, they kept saying it takes a neighborhood to make a neighborhood, and there's not a neighborhood here. Never mind that the population density of this neighborhood, St. Louis Place, is actually higher than this really wealthy suburb out west. There are more people living there than they are in this suburb called Ladue, which is really fancy, but it's the wrong kind of people.
Yeah.
So they all lose their houses, and I talked to some of them.
And can I say, as a side note, for people who follow, the famous Pruitt-Igoe disaster,
right?
Where the city, the state.
The city, and it was sort of this modernist architecture. It was going to be better living through architecture. There were problems with the architecture, but really what failed it was like segregation. So the city becomes a landlord. The city does not keep up the buildings. They're essentially, it's a black neighborhood, and the city falls apart, and they have to implode them. And then St. Louis doesn't do anything with the land.
It becomes this amazing urban forest.
So in the middle on the north side of downtown, there are just trees growing up through sidewalks,
which is another story, but
they wanted that land.
That's what the government
NGA
wanted.
You're right. St. Louis Pruitt-Igoe'd itself twice, because originally they were going to use this thing and do the exact same thing again, because there was a neighborhood there. Obviously, they got erased to build this other neighborhood in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. That land wasn't big enough because they need sort of a security corridor around it. So they literally took the land across the street from where a lot of the residents of Pruitt-Igoe had gotten kicked out of and then moved to St. Louis Place and bought their first homes. So, I mean, you can imagine the sort of generational wealth that's now been sort of wiped out.
And there's something kind of amazing about the thing that's theoretically guiding us to and it's like drones and maps, it's always farmers and soldiers. Like there's which it's like the Georgics or something. Like what are we?
And policymakers, it's a bid for authority. If you take when we think about the big picture, as soon as someone says that to you, get a little nervous.
Yeah, I don't want to think about the big picture, but I was going to say, there's a great chapter where he is, of course, sitting behind Adam Schiff, who will quote Disney, something from Disney. We can't remember exactly what he quotes in his speech at the opening of this new giant thing they're putting in there.
And we're sitting in an empty field that they keep calling an empty field while the protesters are outside of it saying, by the way, that was my house.
That's our field.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing thing. There's this kind of amazing history of St. Louis as the gated or gateway city, depending on how you look at it. But also, I was like, that's where Lewis and Clark set up to go on the exploration, the first Army Corps of Engineer thing. And this spy agency setup, the mapping setup, is a kind of descendant of the Army Corps of Engineer mapping. And that gets us to.
This is a beautiful map, by the way.
Thank you so much.
Of my own book.
That gets up to around the third question, which is that there's this terrific phrase, the term that comes up in the book a lot, ground truth. You can't, as you will learn reading the book, but as you may know, if you land on the moon and start looking for craters, you can have great GPS data, but you need somebody to check it out on the ground. It might not work. I saw that I'm never good with the letters of the alphabet, but it's the NGA. Help me. I saw that the NGA was involved with that USS Guardian, that the ship that was in the Philippines that followed just the NGA data and accidentally ended up on a reef, so they had to get rid of that whole U.S. naval ship because sailors are supposed to do both. They're supposed to use the ground truth and the and the GPS data. So the other thing I can say, if I go for the big picture with the book, is that you're constantly going back and forth between playing with the ground truth versus the long view, and there's that kind of technical, terrifying long view, but and then there's the kind of terrifying technical ground truth with something that I hate about driving around now is that after reading the book is that I love the book, but I hate that I have to think about how, my license plate's being filmed everywhere because of the companies that you talk about in there. But on both sides of these two terms that play against each other, the ground truth and the long view, and reconciling those, and the beauty of that work to reconcile it, on both sides of those, like either one can be kind of dark and terrifying, but also kind of beautiful.
Yeah, I mean,
that's my question.
That's sure, and I'm gonna steal that map. Y'all watch me. It's like the ref with the soccer ball at the end of the match. I'm gonna. Yeah, I mean, the book. I remember very well when we were shopping the book, and I was talking to the one editor who bought it, Ben, who's maybe here, maybe not, maybe he has the flu like everyone else in your city, but he was kind of like, he was like, I get it, aerial view bad, ground good, and that would be one way to explain the book. Aerial view is coercive, it's power, it's privilege, it's colonial gaze, it's all those things. Ground view is messy, radical, dynamic, truthier than but that's not quite it. Yeah. And that's certainly not, that's like an op-ed. That's not enough to drive a whole book. So you're right that it keeps breaking down. And, of course there are things that are like aerial view bad, like don't use it for drones. How about, but it's an unstable. So at the end, I think the book is trying to perform what it might look like to see both. And that feels like a cop-out. It's not an or, it's an and. But there's some sort of...
you talk about stereographs.
Yeah, an unstable double vision kind of thing is what I think I was going for towards the end. because there are amazing things about the long view and the awe, and of course awe is sort of pitched with terror, but that's I mean that does interesting things to us, and it's without maps we don't get anywhere. I think it's a lot of the I mean maps are so problematic, but they're also like how we get shit done.
Yeah.
And it's how you get from A to B. And I'm also drawn, there's something called the egocentric view where everything relates to me. But the allocentric view is
Wait,
where
there's another view besides that
I
for
mean,
me?
I
thought there was only
I
one.
hear
Okay,
tell
yeah,
of
all right,
the
yes.
allocentric
Okay,
view,
yes.
where you relate objects to each other, which is how you make a map.
Uh-huh.
And that, to me, philosophically, is how it leads to all sorts of things like community and meaningful sacrifice and looking beyond the self. So there are ways. Anyway, the too long don't it's complicated. Read
Yeah.
the book and find out.
Well, find out that it's complicated.
Right.
Yeah, but also find the beauty in that complication. And yeah, and I think it's. I mean, not that I've been cued, but I think that it's. I think that's why. I mean, one of the things you get from the book is like, it's okay to go back to a map and go over it and see how it's working for you, and then maybe redraw it or.
Yeah, I mean, so the book does avoid being too prescriptive. Like I have lots of opinions and thoughts. Happy to talk to you about it afterwards. But I mean, the idea is that you go and kind of draw your own map. Like one of the quintessential moves, which you brought up, is beware the person who shows up in your town trying to sell you a map. And a book is, what is a book but a map? So there are ways in the book, like it's braided, leaving like some room for the reader to come in and argue back or make their own connections or disagree, whatever. So it's not, I was trying to sort of do both, and it's very much pitched in ambivalence in a lot of ways.
I'm all for pitching in and ambivalence. But what the Cahokia mounds.
Oh, the Cahokia, yeah.
Cahokia, the mounds that are on the outskirts of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a bit about those? And do you like what did you know about those maybe before you got to St. Louis?
Nothing before I got to St. Louis.
So this is a several part question. One, can you tell the good people who are behind the lights somewhere that and at home at the viewing audience live streaming, can you tell them, what the mounds are, where they are, your first encounter with them, and then how for you they play a part in this book?
Sure. And I'm trying to make sure I get all my facts right. I tried to study on the plane up here. No, but so
we can erase it and change and check.
We call it Cahokia, but obviously that's not what it was called then, and this was a name given much later. But for now, we'll say Cahokia. It's an ancient indigenous civilization. It's like the most complex, biggest settlement north of Mesoamerica. Reaches a peak around 1250. It's bigger than London, and it's a series of mounds. And so mounds that are plotted to align with the stars, the sun, on equinoxes, etc. But also
what we see now are a series of mounds, right?
Yes,
in the St. Louis area.
We're going to get to that because
I know,
the
so
mounds
excited.
get not surprisingly knocked down. But before they were knocked down, back then, many people think that sort of social order was maintained via oversight. Like the rulers were up high on the mound surveilling those below, and that's the way they sort of controlled this massive population just across the river from St. Louis. And all those mounds spilled across the river into St. Louis too. St. Louis grows up, and the civilization disappears. And it's huge. It stretches from the Gulf to the Atlantic. There are artifacts from the Gulf and the Atlantic that they find in these mounds. So that's the trading zone of this massive civilization. And then it's gone. And they don't quite know why it's gone. But the mounds remain. And then, settlers come in and knock them all down, except for some. And some still exist. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there are still some mounds in East St. Louis you can go and see. And I walk on them and talk about them. But what it is, it's sort of like, part of it is history and the buried histories, but also just St. Louis's aerial imagination. This has been sort of baked into St. Louis, and you go from these mounds to early flight, ballooning, all the way up to Boeing, where they're building space capsules and
but the mounds
rocket ships.
Are the mounds part of all those other things you just said are baked in, but are the mounds baked in as much?
I mean,
I don't know.
There's one left in the city. Just they've sold it back to the Osage Nation, who tore
Yeah.
down the house that was perched on top of it. But that's the only one left in the city. But the city, I mean, so I quote some stuff for the city through the years where they're like, what do we do with these mounds? Do we build a
Right.
beer hall on them? Do we dig into them? I mean, all these horrible things. They sort of level the mounds, and they end up using some of the mounds to make the bricks to build the city. So
Right.
that's why I probably said baked in. And a lot of them are over sort of kind of not, it's cheating to say it's where the NGA is now, but they're within view of the NGA.
That's amazing. Because one of the things I think is, the view and where you are in it, and I'm so no Einstein, but and I think you talk about relativity, but one of the things you take away from this book, I think, is, tell me how wrong I am, please, is that the view is all about time. And that's what's so beautiful. Towards the end of the book, you're out in the desert. There's some really beautiful notes on just seeing stillness in the desert.
Thanks.
And, when we're out towards, is it Jeff? I can never remember which billionaire has the rockets out there.
Bezos.
It's
yeah.
Jeff. And they...
you call him Jeff?
There's a great
Jeffy?
There's a great Shatner scene in the book
Oh.
where Shatner returns to Earth and weeps. But anyway, but time, that's the thing that many of the appliances and the tools we use to give us a sense of where we are, they kind of take away time. It seems like they immediately take away time.
Yeah.
So I'm not against, the old Thoreau saying, use the appliances, don't let them use you. It's all fine. But time seems to be, and that's why it's such a beautiful ending, because everything slows down in the eclipse.
Yeah.
I only got it partial, and I was blown away. So
It's
to even
worth
be
the total.
with somebody with a total,
If you
that's
have
amazing.
the means for a total.
But there was no meat at the barbecue, which is kind of terrifying too.
Ran out.
So, but how do you feel time differently, or anything after thinking about this, after doing this?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know how many of y'all have read the book, so I'll try to. You're like, what the hell are they talking about? So the book
it's fine.
ends.
That's
I mean,
okay.
space and time ends up being what the book is sort of about by the end, and so I go. One of the problems for the book is that it's doing this. I worry in the book that I'm starting to fall into the exact same problematic habits of thinking that the people do in the book. Like the book is performing its own kind of long-range reconnaissance. As I leap from topic to topic, I'm not staying with stuff, and I'm building a map, for better or for worse. So instead of just writing about this clock that Bezos didn't come up with, he just had the $42 million it took to build it.
He builds a clock
that these sort of people had been thinking about for years, and it comes out of like Stuart Brand, who's in there for the Whole Earth catalog. He's in the beginning of the book, but it turns out he and this engineer named Danny Hillis have come up with the idea to make a clock that's going to last for 10,000 years. And I'll try to do this quickly. And I find out about it during the pandemic when I'm sort of, holed up in my place looking at pictures from space and teaching on Zoom and all the sort of weird space-time stuff that I was fortunate to be holed up. But anyway, they build this clock. Bezos gives them the money and a mountain, because it takes a mountain, and they bury this clock in the mountain. And it's this whole engineering experiment. What's a clock that's going to outlast us? How do you do this? What happens if climate change? Can the clock self-correct if we're in a nuclear winter for a couple hundred years? And they go through this thought experiment, and they say that the point is not, gee whiz, we built a really cool clock. It's to get people now thinking about the future and how can we be around in 10,000 years to see it. So that's the sort of idea.
Right.
But for me, all I can think of is Ozymandias. This is the biggest folly. I can't, and it's
Right.
42 million, whatever. It's what a blockbuster movie costs, but it's more money
Right.
than I have. And what a waste of everything.
Well,
But he's doing it across the street, across the highway from where he's launching William Shatner into space. So I have space and time literally there. So
Yeah.
one of the ways the book is trying to destabilize this long-range reconnaissance is I go someplace and walk around on the ground and talk to people. So I go out there and I talk to some I run into some Blue Origin folks. I go out there, Bezos happens to be there, and he's flying his little black helicopter around. And you're right, you can't actually get to the clock because they won't let you see the clock because it's supposed to be kind of, I mean, it's hard to get to. It takes a long time to get to it because it's at the top of the mountain. But it also is meant to be kind of a thought experiment. But I'm going to destabilize that by like driving up right up to the edge of the thing and just staring at it and looking at it with my binoculars and then seeing Bezos' security team coming by and like, are you still here? Right across from the spaceport where you can see all the winking lights of the spaceport. And I just sit there for a while and I don't know, get a little fruity with the prose.
It wasn't fruity. It was. I mean,
I'm in my.
It wasn't fruity.
There.
It was. I want to say you're going to think it's bad when I say dry, but it was the desert. It was so dry and so beautiful, so lovely. Clock reminds me that there is a time limit, and I think maybe there's questions.
We've blown past it.
You want to have the prizes for the first question? Is that what?
Oh yeah, I brought a bribe that a friend of mine made.
Again, this is.
You're not on, but I'll tell you, the first 3 questions get these weird, handy little binoculars that fold up flat so you can put it into your pocket that a friend of mine made and say, yeah, have the book cover on it.
Hello.
Get it? Yeah, you're on now.
Great.
Back to you.
We're going to see if we can do 3. So
3,
we can
okay.
get these 3 away. So
Who's the first
got a
winner
question?
/ question asker? Here we go.
Is it like Cracker Jack in there or something like that?
No,
Okay.
they work.
There's a view.
Sometimes they fall apart, but you could sort of duct tape it
There's a
back
view
in.
inside it.
Yeah, you can look.
Oh, nice.
I'm not saying they'll work for like birding, but they'll
All right.
spy on your neighbors.
I like that. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. These two, the long view and the ground truth, space and time, these kind of dualities in your process, and I liked Robert's first question because I wanted to keep going with that. The question about how you did this book. You got a little practical about it, but I was hoping we could circle back to a more conceptual space. And
So was I.
Oh, you're ganging up on me.
oh, okay. And maybe just asking you a question about method may get you to kind of sway one way or another. So, in the course of you writing this book, and I don't know how long it took or whatever, it sounds like you did a lot of different things. Did you ever write while you were moving through, like, being totally literal, and why I'm asking that question is that there's like a sense of being disembodied and embodied at different scales through multiple realities of time and space. And so the only thing, not so much self, but so much like, how are we embodied with these different scales? And so one way to do that might be to write while moving. So
And
I was just wondering about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have like 4 answers, and I'm going to try to limit myself to just one. So thanks for that. Yeah, I was nervous about doing this book because it certainly felt a lot more wifty or theoretical than my other books. And I kept worrying, so the idea is I just go somewhere in stage of view, and that's fine, but it's not probably my natural writing register. How am I going to do this? So practically, research-wise, I work best monomaniacal, so I would just pick one topic, endlessly research and obsess about it, write it up. If it was good, it would go in the book. If it didn't, it would get, shunted into shit only Edward cares about, and I'm going to bore you at dinner with, and so my family suffers in this method. But I certainly always wrote while I was researching, and that's something I tell my students, because writers are such good procrastinators. If you would just, there's always going to be another book that I had to read, in theory, before I could. If I needed that sort of permission, then I never would have started writing. So I wrote, when I was in West Texas, most of that section was written back in my hotel or in the rental car on the side of the highway. I took a lot of notes. The middle part, which we sort of haven't talked much about, is the pandemic, and it becomes this sort of pivot in the book. And I didn't do any writing during the pandemic. Like I said, I was fortunate. I was teaching on Zoom, but I had no emotional anything for writing or thinking. But I did keep a lot of notes during the pandemic, and so that's what I used. That was actually it was a weird book. I wrote a lot of the middle before then I went back and finished where I'd started, and then had to write the whole end, which is not my usual process. But yeah, I was worried about because the whole point of the book is not to lose sight of the bodies. The long view wants to forget bodies. It's bodiless, right? It can go anywhere. It's the God's eye, and the problem with the God's eye is it's so quickly. God's sight slips into bomb sight really quickly. and historically, and also just that's how humans work. So I was worried about neglecting bodies on the ground. So I have a body, and then I go talk to other people, and I was definitely writing in each section while I was doing it. Did I answer any of that? Okay, no, that's all I got.
I think I have. What do I got? Right there? Peter's got it.
You do.
So the beginning passage that you read, thank you, how fun. The beginning passage that you read made me think about Orbital, right, which is the novel that
I
takes
just
a-
read that. It's so
great.
good.
It's so good. But one thing and it's definitely a different twist on the Blue Marble.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who don't know what the conceit of the book, it's I think one day on the
one like
International
Earth
Space
clock
Station.
day. Sorry. You
Of astronauts flying, multiple times around the Earth. Is that guy filming me? Okay. So my question was, so one of the things that's fascinating about that book is that it's obviously the long view in the most extreme sense, and everybody goes into a deep inner view of their own life experience. That's really the view that you get even more than you get of the Blue Marble, like of Earth from this perspective.
Right.
And so it turns into really a story about how the long view is a deep, deep pathway to connection to the planet. It's maybe coming back around to the Blue Marble. So when you say the danger of it, and you've talked a lot about the negativity of the long view, I'm curious, especially if you've just read that book, there seems to be this third piece. There's ground truthing things. There's the long view, which is an expression of power. And then there's this inner view that is somewhere constructed between the two. I'm just curious if that was something that you experienced in writing your book.
Yeah, sure. Right. Personally, yes. Like I said, I'm sort of a sucker for the sublime. Like I'll try to chase anything that's going to knock me out of my sort of, ho-hum, mouth-breathing day-to-day existence. So there's a lot of and I didn't read it, talk about pictures from space, pictures into space that sort of send your mind reeling. They're terrifying, but they also are wondrous. And awe does a lot of really cool things, like on a physiological level, it heals you. It takes care of inflammation, all these, and it's like a different emotion than joy. Like they can measure it, they being scientists, not writers. So yes, the book talks a lot about awe. I definitely start out a little suspicious of the quote unquote overview effect because it just sounds so wifty again, like amazing. But there are, it's repeated by astronauts. You go up and you feel just how small you are and how precarious this world is. And oh my God, I got to take care of it, etc. Which is kind of why and they come down feeling really good. And I love that William Shatner goes up and he's up for half a second. He barely hits, he crosses the Kármán line. So he's an astronaut. Thank God. He's finally did it. But he comes down and he's just devastated. And they're and of course they're filming it and they're what'd you see? And he goes, all I saw was death. And they're cut, not really, but again, it is a consciousness raising. It does shock him out of his perspective. It is that encounter with the sublime, but for a different way, and it's scary. So he also ends up being oh my God, we got to take care of this planet. Yay. But it doesn't make him feel good. And I love Orbital. It's a novel. Y'all should all check it out. But the book does talk about different ways to deal with, pictures from space. And we were talking backstage. There's so much and I swear it's not just because I wrote this book, and it did take me a while. So I've been obsessing over these things for a while. But there seems I now see it everywhere. But one of the good things from the book that there's an update on is 2026 should be pretty great for wonder. And so we will finally. As soon as February, NASA says, Artemis 2 might launch, which is going to do, not land on the moon, but do a lap around the moon, which means this will be the first time, literally since the Blue Marble was taken, that human eyes will see the whole Earth again. And I'm trying to be hopeful these days. And, we could certainly use a dose of compassion and clarity, if that's what that means. But that's just kind of cool. The other thing, the book, early on, I bring up the pale blue dot photo taken by Voyager, and the book actually ends with that. It's after the acknowledgments, it's after everything. I got them to slip it in at the very back. But that the Voyager 1 probe, and this just blows my mind, this year is finally going to reach, I don't want to get this wrong, 1 light day away from Earth, which is kind of shocking. Like how fast, it's the distance light travels in an entire day. Something we made, basically a glorified Atari, is there looking back at us. And of course, it shut down its camera, but it still talks to us. And to me, that's just, again, sort of the bottom drops out of my existence. But the point is, you can't stay at the long view. You have to come back to your body and muddle around on the ground with the rest of us. But I do think that act is, it's not checking out. It can be like replenishing in a weird sort of way, I hope.
Folks, that's all the time we have. Speaking of time.
You can still can we give the person who had his hand up the last?
Can I? Are you going to be the one? Okay.
Yeah, you just
All right,
have it.
That's fair. You can just have it.
You just have it. I don't want to take it home.
But Edward, you're going to come out and answer questions and sign books outside, right?
Sure.
So join
Sure.
us out here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming, and thanks to Robert.